The Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner, joins us once again. Very good to see you. Well, let's start with universal credit, and of course we understand, we know what Labour's position in it is. But what is your assessment of how much damage can be done by not continuing with this? As Therese Coffey said, it was always intended to be temporary uplift.
What's frustrating is working people are really struggling at the moment. 2.5 million will be hit by a double whammy of the national insurance hike as well as the cut to universal credit, which would mean over £1,000 for the very care workers and the key workers, the retail workers who have kept the country going. And at the same time, the landlords who have multiple properties will not pay a penny extra on their income. We think that's completely unfair.
Again, I go back to the argument that Therese Coffey always brings up, that this was a temporary measure. And actually, when you look at the amount of money that is being spent on it and the amount of money that the government is spending on many, many other things, in the long term, it's just unaffordable.
It's unaffordable to plunge working families into destitution and poverty. They've broke their manifesto pledge by hiking national insurance up for the working families, 2.5 million. And at the same time, people who have great assets and wealth and landlords who may have multiple properties earning lots of income from them will not pay a penny more. We think that's completely unfair. And the government have got the wrong priorities. And yet they're saying they want to create more jobs. But it's all right to say that if you can't then afford to be in work because you can't afford to support your family, then this is disastrous for our economy and absolutely going to hit the most hardest working families and those on the smallest incomes, the very workers that kept us going through the COVID crisis. I think that's a slap in the face for them. Never mind clapping care workers. A band 5 nurse will pay over will see over £1,000 cut from their income because of this government's announcement on the universal credit, as well as the announcement on the national insurance tax hike, which they broke their manifesto on.
Let's talk just briefly then about the national insurance contributions hike. I mean, clearly there is a massive problem in the health service at the moment. Waiting lists are as long as my arm. We've got a problem in terms of social care. What would Labour do instead? If not national insurance, where would the money come from?
Well, waiting lists are at a 12-year high. We've seen the 10 years of austerity. I was a home care worker for years. Many of my colleagues were given voluntary redundancy and those services were cut because of the cuts to local government funding. And therefore, what we need is more investment in home care, because actually, if people are kept out of hospital and given the care when they need it, it costs us less. And we've also said, that people like private landlords, on their income that they generate, people who have large financial transactions and assets should pay more. That it shouldn't just fall on working people. The 2.5 million working people that kept us going through this crisis are going to be over £1,000 a year worse off because of what this government is doing. That is unfair. They shouldn't do that.
That's fine, but how much money then, OK, for example, could you raise from landlords?
Well, it would be a number of different ways. We're saying that it's not just about particularly landlords. Yes, that is a way of... Because what we're saying is income that's generated, those at the top have created more wealth for themselves. They've done well. Whereas those at the bottom who have been keeping us going through this COVID crisis are going to be worse off. We think that's unfair. The government should stretch it out, and those with the broadest shoulders should pay more, not those that are on the bottom run of the ladder. Those that are in the lowest income are going to be double whammied, not only by this national insurance hike, but the withdrawal of those funds for universal credit. That's over £1,000 a year. These people are on huge amounts of money. Sure. That's going to leave them in poverty and destitution. That's not fair.
But you know as well as I do the reason that I'm pushing for a more fleshed out plan from Labour, because there are people within your own party, as we head into conference season, looking for a better set out plan as to how to deal with social care. Can we expect to get more detail by the time of conference?
Well, of course we'll set out our plan, and I've already said that those with the broadest shoulders should pay more. I've given you a couple of examples of how that can happen. And not only that, what's really important is I was a home carer. I delivered it in my local community, and we've shown that actually if you deliver care in the community when people need it, that actually you keep them out of hospital, so the waiting list will go down, the referrals and admissions into hospital will go down. That costs less, and giving people the right care in their own home is actually not only the right thing to do for them, for their care package, but it saves us money as well. So it's a combination of those with the broadest shoulders paying more, as well as restructuring the social care system so that people can get home care when they need it. This government have cut home care. They've cut those vital services over 10 years of austerity to local authorities. And now they're cutting the support to 2.5 million working families and making them pay more. That's not fair. And at the same time, landlords who have multiple properties that are making a huge amount of income and not paying a penny more.
We have made that point several times now. The point that I am making, and I think that others are making, is that it's fine for Labour to stand up at the dispatch box and criticise the government in terms of their own policy, point out the flaws in it. But time and again, it feels that when the question shifts to, well, what would you do instead? There isn't the level of detail, there isn't the granularity that is necessary to provide an alternative, or even to say that you are providing an alternative.
Well, I've just outlined that, and actually I said that when... And let me be clear, that when Labour was last in government, that's when I was a home carer, we had MVQ, National Vocational Qualification, entry level 2. So care workers were skilled workers. We had home care in the community. We had care homes that were able to deliver care when people needed it. What I'm saying is 10 years of the Tories have seen those cuts to local government, cuts to home care, and now we've got a 12-year record high in waiting lists in the NHS. That's because of the policies of this government. When Labour was in government, waiting lists were at an all-time low for the NHS, and that care was given in the community, and home carers were given a vocational qualification, so they were a skilled workforce that could support people at home. We want to go back to that delivery model, which will also save the taxpayers money.
Just in terms of the public health response to COVID-19, vaccine passports have been, well, depending on who you listen to in government, have been ruled in, ruled out, left on the table, don't want to use it, but it is an option. What's the Labour Party position on all of this? Should COVID passports be mandatory in, for example, the nighttime industries, in stadium events? What's your view?
Well, what's really frustrating is that there has been this confusion. Last week, I was at the dispatch box with the minister telling me that they needed COVID passports in large venues and events. This weekend, we had the health secretary changing his mind on that. What we said, and the Welsh Labour government have introduced a policy of making sure that we have risk assessments. That's the first thing we need to have, mandatory risk assessments, because different venues have different procedures. They may have different ventilation, different sizes, indoor, outdoor, so it should be risk assessed. And we should have a combination of making sure that people can show that they've had the vaccine, but also, even if you've had the vaccine, you can still have COVID. So free testing must be part of that process as well, so that people can see if they've got the virus and make the informed decision to self-isolate. And the government have been completely lacking in clarity here, which is not good for business. This was supposed to be implemented in a couple of weeks. And yet they've just changed it all again this weekend. Businesses have struggled over the last 18 months. And what they're saying to Labour is they need certainty, and they want to be able to open up in a safe way that supports people so that we can get our economy working again. And this government is making that more difficult.
Angela Rayner, good to see you. Thanks for joining us in the studio.